Whenever I have lessons with my students, I'll usually start by asking them, what is the thing that you are most insecure about when you speak English? What are you worrying about? Are you worried about your grammar? Are you worried about pronunciation? Are you worried about vocabulary? Do you have enough to express the ideas that you would like to express? As you can imagine, the answer is almost always different depending on the student, and that's okay. So why don't you leave me a comment and tell me, for you, what is the most difficult part of learning English? And to my students who usually don't know where to start, I give this advice. How do we learn language? How do we learn? Well, as babies, we don't study grammar. Grammar, what is that? Nothing. It means nothing. We learn from making connections. We learn from hearing and seeing and watching people's faces. We can understand anger or frustration or happiness from faces, and we acquire through context. That's why when people ask how to learn a language or what is a good process, the answer is always to start as simply as possible. What is that? Vocabulary, clauses. What do you need to form a clause? You need a noun and you need a verb. So I would start learning some nouns. Food, table, house. Start learning some nouns and then start to build up a collection of verbs. Eat, watch, live. Because once you have a collection of nouns and verbs, you can put them together to create ideas. Live, house. My house. I, hungry. And even though it's the caveman English, it's the baby English, it's okay because it's communication. It's a way to communicate basic ideas. Then after you have some vocabulary that you can use, then you can move on to some structures. You can move on to grammar, some simple sentences, start to put those learn where those words belong in a sentence. Learn where the noun goes, where the verb goes, where the preposition, those 9. There are 9 parts of speech.
Nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, pronouns, and nouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives, prepositions, adverbs.
Once you have enough vocabulary, then you can start to learn those 9 parts of speech and learn where they belong in a sentence, and then you can start to construct sentences. Now, that part may seem complicated, but honestly, slow down. Whenever it gets difficult or frustrating, slow down, focus on one structure at a time. Because at the end of the day, English, just like maybe the language that you speak, there are patterns. And once we learn those patterns, we can just put things where they belong and we can create one sentence, then another, then another, then another, then another, then another, then another. It's a long process. It can be frustrating. It takes time and dedication. But again, start simply and build. Sometimes I will meet students and immediately say to them, wow, you have really good grammar, because they can change from present tense to present perfect, and they can transition very easily from tense to tense. And that's commendable. That's fantastic. But then I may ask a question like, so how was your weekend? What did you do on the weekend? And then that's when it gets a little bit dicey, because they don't have skills in speaking, in communication. So that's a thing that I think is very important to learn is that there's a difference between knowing something, knowing how to do something, and actually being able to do that thing. So the ability, the skills, it comes from practice. It comes from speaking. So that's your next step. After you start to build and create those patterns and you become very familiar with them, well, you need to practice. You need to practice a lot. And that's difficult because sometimes we don't have access to maybe a language school, or maybe we don't have friends who speak this language that we are trying to learn. And that's why it can be very difficult to get the practice. I suggest to you to try and build a world around yourself, an English world. That is difficult, but if it's your phone, change the language on your phone so that it speaks to you in English. Change your television settings so that your subtitles are in English, or if it's an English version of the movie, try and watch it in English with subtitles in your language. So everywhere you can, music, entertainment, your phone, try and build a world filled with English. Submerge yourself. Immerse. That's the word. Immerse yourself in English. And little by little, you will notice that some things start to stick. And you'll be able to converse in a way that is a little bit more natural. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Me, sometimes I can be a perfectionist, but this is not good. Because if you are so afraid, you won't speak. And if you don't speak, you won't improve. So you can't be afraid to make mistakes. Make the mistakes, learn from them, keep practicing, and eventually you'll speak English like a pro. That's my little tip for today about how to learn a language. Please, if you're not already subscribe to my channel and hit that like button, that bell notification so you won't miss any new uploads. And then I'll talk to you on the next one. Bye.